Ever notice how kids just know things, not because someone told them, but because they feel it in their bones? At Westlake Academy, where the parking lot looks like a luxury car showroom, 8-year-old Madeline Bennett couldn't take her eyes off her new art teacher. Not for a minute. Not even when the teacher called on other students. Not even when the principal walked in. The staring got so intense that other kids started whispering. Teachers exchanged looks in the hallway, but Madeline didn't care. She'd spotted something on Miss Torres's wrist when she reached up to hang a painting. A small crescent-shaped birthmark that made Madeline's heart skip. She had that exact same mark in that exact same spot. What no one realized was that Madeline's relentless staring would eventually force her father, a man who could buy and sell the school 10 times over, down to his knees on that classroom floor, face to face with the woman he'd been told had abandoned him, and the truth that would cost him everything he thought mattered. In today's story, I'm sharing something that proves how a child's instinct can crack open secrets that money and power tried to bury. Vivian Torres noticed the staring on her very first day. Teaching art at Westlake wasn't her dream job, not even close. But the pay was better than the community center where she'd worked for years, and the health insurance actually covered things. When you're 42 with medical bills that never stop coming, you make compromises. "Ms. Torres, can you help me with my brush?" A boy in the front row asked, holding up a paintbrush dripping with blue watercolor. "Of course, Tyler." Vivian smiled, grateful for the distraction from those eyes. Those familiar eyes that followed her every move. As she demonstrated the proper brush technique, she felt it again, that gaze burning into her back. She turned slightly, catching Madeline Bennett watching her with an intensity that seemed impossible for a child so young. Vivian had taught hundreds of children over the years. Some were shy, some were troublemakers, some were natural artists. But she'd never had a student look at her the way this little girl did, like she was trying to read something written in invisible ink on Vivian's face. After class, Vivian stayed behind, organizing supplies and trying to shake off the unease. The classroom door opened, and Diane, the third-grade teacher, poked her head in. "How's it going with the Bennett girl?" Diane asked, lowering her voice even though the room was empty. Vivian looked up. "You noticed too." "Everyone's noticed. She does that thing where she just stares. Has she said anything to you?" "Not really. She's actually very quiet. Talented, though." Vivian held up a watercolor painting. A night sky with a crescent moon that somehow managed to capture more emotion than most adults could express. "Well, just a heads up. Her father is Jackson Bennett." "Should that mean something to me?" Diane laughed. "You really aren't from around here, are you?" "Jackson Bennett. Bennett Enterprises. The man practically owns half the city. His name is on the new hospital wing." Vivian's hand froze midway through cleaning a paintbrush. Something cold slid down her spine. "Bennett," she repeated, the name feeling strange in her mouth. "I didn't realize. Just thought you should know. The Bennetts aren't people you want to upset, especially not over something silly like a kid with a staring problem." After Diane left, Vivian sat down heavily at her desk. Bennett. It had to be a coincidence. Jackson was a common name. Bennett was a common name. There was no way it could be him. Her Jackson. The one she'd known before he became whoever he was now. The next day, the staring continued. Vivian tried to ignore it, focusing instead on teaching the class about primary colors. But halfway through her demonstration, she noticed something else. Madeline wasn't just staring at her face anymore. The girl's eyes were fixed on Vivian's wrist, where her sleeve had ridden up. Instinctively, Vivian tugged her sleeve down, covering the small crescent-shaped birthmark she'd had since birth. The one her mother used to say looked like a little moon watching over her. "Miss Torres?" Madeline's voice was soft but clear, the first time she'd spoken directly to Vivian in class. "Yes, Madeline." "Can I show you something after class?" The other students had already lost interest, returning to their color-mixing experiments. Vivian nodded, trying to keep her voice casual. "Of course." When the bell rang and the other children filed out, Madeline stayed behind, carefully packing her supplies with deliberate slowness until they were alone. Then, without a word, she walked up to Vivian's desk and held out her wrist. There, in exactly the same spot as Vivian's, was an identical crescent-shaped birthmark. Vivian couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't move. "My dad has one too," Madeline said simply. "He says it's how the moon marked our family." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Vivian gripped the edge of her desk, steadying herself. That's a lovely thought," she managed to say. "Birthmarks are special." "Do you have family with the same mark?" Madeline asked. Those eyes, so familiar, searching Vivian's face. "I did, once." The words slipped out before Vivian could stop them. By the end of the week, the principal called Vivian into her office. Dr. Winters was a tall woman with perfect posture, and the kind of efficiency that bordered on coldness. "Miss Torres, I've received some concerns about your interaction with Madeline Bennett," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Concerns? From whom?" "From other teachers. Apparently the child's fixation on you has become disruptive, and now I hear you've been having private conversations with her after class." Vivian felt her face flush. "She wanted to show me her artwork. I'm her art teacher." Dr. Winters studied her for a moment. "Ms. Torres, you've been with us for less than a month. Westlake Academy has certain standards. The Bennett family has been generous donors for years. If there's any issue with their daughter, we need to address it properly." "By properly, you mean?" "I mean, I've scheduled a parent-teacher conference for tomorrow afternoon. Mr. Bennett will be attending." The name hit Vivian like a physical blow. "Mr. Bennett himself? Not Mrs. Bennett?" "Catherine Bennett is in Europe this month. Mr. Bennett handles most school matters anyway." Dr. Winters raised an eyebrow. "Is that a problem?" "No," Vivian said, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "No problem at all. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button. Trust me, what happens next changed these people's lives forever, and I want to make sure you don't miss it." That night, Vivian couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, stopping occasionally to look at the one photo she'd kept all these years, a faded Polaroid of two young people laughing by a lake, their whole lives ahead of them. She'd torn it in half years ago in a moment of anger, keeping only her half of the image. The other person was just an arm around her shoulders now, the face gone. But she didn't need the photo to remember his face. Jackson, her Jackson, the struggling business student with big dreams and a crescent moon birthmark on his wrist. The man who'd promised her the world and vanished from her life without a trace 15 years ago. Could it really be him? After all this time? And Madeline, with that same birthmark. Vivian's mind raced through calculations she'd avoided for years. The timing would be right, but it was impossible. He couldn't be the same Jackson, and even if he was, he couldn't know. No one knew. She'd made sure of that. The next day, Vivian dressed with unusual care, a simple navy dress that looked professional but not expensive. She arrived at school early, arranging the classroom, her hand shaking slightly as she straightened already straight rows of desks. At precisely 3:30, there was a knock at her classroom door. Dr. Winters entered first, her smile tight and professional. "Ms. Torres, this is Mr. Bennett, Madeline's father." And there he was, 15 years older, sharper around the edges, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Vivian's monthly rent, but unmistakably him. Jackson, her Jackson. For a split second, something flickered across his face, confusion, perhaps recognition, but it was gone so quickly Vivian thought she might have imagined it. "Miss Torres." His voice was deeper than she remembered, more controlled. He extended his hand, and Vivian took it automatically. "I understand you've been having some issues with my daughter." Dr. Winters excused herself after a few minutes of pleasantries, leaving Vivian alone with the ghost from her past. Jackson sat in one of the small student chairs, looking comically large in it, but somehow still maintaining his air of authority. "So," he said, checking his watch subtly, "what exactly is the problem with Madeline? Her grades seem fine." Vivian took a steadying breath. "There's no problem with her work. She's actually quite talented. It's just that she's been watching me very intently. It's become noticeable to other students and faculty." Jackson frowned. "Watching you? That's why I'm here. Because my daughter pays attention in class." "It's more than that, Mr. Bennett. It's constant, and it started the moment I arrived at Westlake. Kids fixate on things. She'll move on to something else next week. He waved his hand dismissively, already reaching for his phone. Is that all? She showed me her birthmark, Vivian said quietly. Jackson's hand froze midway to his pocket. What did you say? The crescent-shaped mark on her wrist. She showed it to me and said you have the same one. Something shifted in Jackson's expression, a crack in the polished veneer. He studied Vivian's face more carefully now, as if seeing her for the first time. Have we met before, Miss Torres? Vivian's heart hammered in her chest. I don't believe so, Mr. Bennett. He continued staring at her, his brow furrowed. You seem familiar somehow. I have one of those faces, she said, forcing a smile. Jackson shook his head slightly as if clearing away cobwebs. About Madeline, she's always been an observant child. Too observant sometimes. If her behavior is disruptive, I'll speak with her. That's not necessary. I just wanted you to be aware. As Jackson stood to leave, his sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the edge of the crescent birthmark on his wrist. Vivian looked away quickly, but not before he noticed her gaze. Is there something else, Ms. Torres? Vivian hesitated, then slowly pushed up her own sleeve, revealing the identical mark on her wrist. Jackson stared at it, his face draining of color. That's quite a coincidence. Is it? Vivian asked softly. For a long moment, neither spoke. The classroom clock ticked loudly in the silence. I should go, Jackson finally said, his voice strangely tight. Thank you for your time. He left without another word, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. The next morning, Madeline was absent from class, and the day after that. By the third day, Vivian began to worry that she'd made a terrible mistake. What if Jackson had recognized her? What if he'd connected the dots? What if he'd pulled Madeline out of school because of her? On the fourth day, just as Vivian was beginning to accept that she might never see Madeline again, the girl walked into class 5 minutes late, sliding into her seat without a word. But something had changed. She wasn't staring anymore. Instead, she kept her eyes fixed firmly on her desk. After class, Vivian gently asked her to stay behind. Is everything okay, Madeline? You've been absent. Madeline nodded, still not meeting Vivian's eyes. I had a cold. I see. And are you feeling better now? Another nod. Your father and I had a meeting last week. Did he mention that to you? Madeline finally looked up, her eyes wide. He asked me why I was staring at you. And what did you tell him? I told him about our matching moons. She touched her wrist. He got really quiet after that, then he started asking me questions about you. Vivian's stomach tightened. What kind of questions? If you'd ever told me where you were from. If you'd mentioned anything about your family. Madeline hesitated. He made me show him my baby box. Your baby box? Where Mom keeps all my baby stuff, my adoption papers and first clothes and things. The word hit Vivian like a thunderbolt. Adoption, of course. It all made sense. Now, why Madeline had her birthmark, why she felt drawn to Vivian, but Jackson couldn't know. He couldn't possibly know. Madeline, when were you adopted? When I was a baby. Dad says I was chosen specially. She said it with the practiced tone of a child repeating something they've been told many times. But I heard him and Mom fighting about it once. Mom said he only wanted me because of where I came from. Vivian's hands trembled. She clasped them together to hide it. Do you know where that was? Madeline shook her head. Dad never talks about it, but... She leaned closer, lowering her voice. I found a picture in his office. It was hidden in a book. There was a lady, but her face was torn off. And there was a lake. Dad was there, but he looked really young. The room seemed to spin around Vivian. The lake, the torn photo, the other half of her Polaroid. Miss Torres, are you okay? You look sick. I'm fine, Vivian managed. Just a little tired. You should go to your next class. After Madeline left, Vivian sank into her chair, her mind racing. Jackson had adopted their daughter. Somehow he'd found out about the baby and adopted her. But why? And why had he never tried to find Vivian? Unless he thought she'd abandoned them both. That night, Vivian did something she'd promised herself she'd never do. She searched for Jackson Bennett online. Thousands of results appeared instantly. News articles about business acquisitions, charity galas, his marriage to Catherine Westbrook 15 years ago. There he was, smiling beside a tall, elegant blonde woman at countless society events. The perfect power couple. One headline caught her eye: Bennett and Westbrook merger creates business empire. The date was exactly 15 years ago, just weeks after Jackson had disappeared from her life. The pieces were falling into place now. The Westbrook family, one of the wealthiest in the state. The sudden merger, Jackson's equally sudden disappearance. And then, somehow, he'd found out about the baby Vivian had been forced to give up. But how? And why hadn't he ever contacted her? The next day, Vivian received a note asking her to stay after school for another meeting with Mr. Bennett. Her heart raced as she read it, unsure whether to be terrified or hopeful. At 4:30, Jackson arrived alone. He closed the classroom door behind him, his face unreadable. "I think we need to talk, Vivian." The sound of her name in his voice after all these years made her breath catch. "You remember me?" "Not at first. It's been a long time and you've changed your name. Torres wasn't your last name back then." "No. It was my mother's maiden name. I started using it after everything." Jackson nodded slowly. "I found the adoption records. I've had them for years, but I never looked closely at the birth mother's information. Just a name and medical history. But after seeing your birthmark, I went back and checked. The birth date, the blood type, the medical history, it all matches you." Vivian couldn't speak, couldn't move. "Why did you give her up?" Jackson asked, his voice tight with emotion. "Was it because of me? Because I left?" The question hit her like a slap. "Because you left?" "Jackson, you disappeared. One day we were planning our future, and the next you were gone. No explanation, no goodbye. Nothing." Confusion crossed his face. "What are you talking about? You're the one who left. Your roommate told me you'd moved out, left no forwarding address. Said you'd met someone else." "My roommate?" Vivian shook her head in disbelief. "Rachel told you that. That's impossible. I never moved out. You just stopped coming around. Stopped calling. Vanished. If you're as shocked as I was when I first heard this part of the story, hit that like button right now. The truth of what really happened is about to change everything for these three people." Jackson ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly less like a powerful businessman and more like the confused young man she'd once known. "This doesn't make sense. Rachel specifically told me you'd moved on, that you didn't want me to contact you. Rachel was the one who told me you'd moved on, that you'd gotten engaged to Catherine Westbrook, that your new life didn't have room for complications." They stared at each other as 15 years of misunderstandings hung in the air between them. "The Westbrooks," Vivian said softly. "They didn't want you with someone like me, did they? Not when they were planning to merge their company with yours." Jackson's face hardened. Catherine's father made it very clear that the merger depended on the marriage. "But I wouldn't have agreed if I'd known about the baby. If I'd known you hadn't left me. I tried to find you to tell you I was pregnant, but by then, your engagement was in all the papers. And then, when things got difficult, when I couldn't afford to keep her." "You gave her up for adoption," Jackson finished. "And somehow, through some cosmic joke, the agency contacted me. An anonymous tip, they said. Someone who thought I might be interested in adopting this particular child." Vivian gasped. "Rachel. It had to be Rachel. She was the only one who knew everything. Why would she do that? Why separate us but make sure I got Madeline?" "Because she was dating Catherine's brother," Vivian said, the pieces finally clicking into place. "She must have made a deal with the Westbrooks. Get rid of me, but make sure the baby stayed in your life. Keep it all in the family, but get me out of the picture." Jackson sank into a chair, looking suddenly exhausted. "All these years, I thought you'd left because I wasn't good enough, because I was still struggling while the Westbrooks offered security. And I thought you'd left because your ambition was more important than our love." Vivian's voice broke on the last word. They sat in silence for a long moment. 15 years of pain and misunderstanding stretching between them. "Does Madeline know?" Vivian finally asked. "That I'm her birth mother?" Jackson shook his head. "No, not yet. I wasn't sure. I needed to talk to you first. And Catherine, Does she know? She's always known Madeline was adopted, but she doesn't know you're the birth mother. Our marriage has been complicated. More of a business arrangement than anything else. We've been separated for the past year, though we keep up appearances for the sake of the company. Vivian took a deep breath. What happens now, Jackson? Before he could answer, the classroom door opened. Madeline stood there, her eyes wide, moving from Vivian to Jackson and back again. I forgot my sketchbook, she said quietly. But you were talking about me. Jackson stood up quickly. Madeline, honey, I didn't hear you come in. Madeline stepped into the classroom, clutching her backpack straps tightly. You said Miss Torres is my birth mother. Is that true? The directness of the question left both adults momentarily speechless. Children had a way of cutting through complications adults spent years creating. Why don't you come sit down? Jackson finally said, pulling out a chair for her. Madeline didn't move. Is it true? She repeated, looking at Vivian now. Vivian felt tears welling in her eyes. She nodded slowly. Yes, Madeline, it's true. The little girl's face remained surprisingly calm, as if she'd known all along, and was just waiting for the adults to catch up. That's why we have the same moon, she said, touching her wrist, and that's why I kept wanting to look at you. I felt like I knew you. Madeline, Jackson said gently, this is very complicated. Miss Torres and we knew each other a long time ago, before you were born. Did you love each other? Madeline asked, her gaze direct and unflinching. Jackson looked at Vivian, something softening in his eyes. Yes, very much. Then why did you give me away? Madeline asked Vivian, a hint of hurt finally breaking through her composed exterior. Vivian moved closer, kneeling to be at eye level with her daughter. I didn't want to, Madeline. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But I was alone and I was sick and I couldn't give you the life you deserved. I didn't know about you, Jackson added. If I had, things would have been very different. Madeline considered this, her young mind working through adult complexities with remarkable clarity. So nobody wanted me to go away? It was just a mistake? The biggest mistake of my life, Vivian whispered. Not a day has gone by that I haven't thought about you. Madeline took a step forward, then another, until she was standing right in front of Vivian. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out and touched Vivian's cheek, wiping away a tear Vivian hadn't realized had fallen. Don't cry, she said simply. We found each other now. The pure acceptance in her voice broke something open in Vivian's chest. Without thinking, she pulled Madeline into a gentle hug. After a moment's hesitation, she felt small arms wrap around her neck, holding on just as tightly. Over Madeline's shoulder, Vivian saw Jackson watching them, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. The powerful businessman was gone, replaced by the young man she'd once loved, witnessing the reunion of the family he never knew he had. When they finally separated, Madeline looked between her parents with a child's practical approach to problem-solving. So what happens now? Do we all live together? Jackson cleared his throat. It's not that simple, sweetheart. There's a lot we need to figure out. Why not? Madeline persisted. Mom's always in Europe anyway. She doesn't even like being home. Jackson and Vivian exchanged uncomfortable glances. Madeline, Jackson said carefully, we need to take this one step at a time. Right now, the important thing is that we've found each other. The rest we'll figure out together. Madeline seemed satisfied with this answer, at least temporarily. Can Miss Torres, can my real mom come over for dinner tonight? The question hung in the air, simple yet loaded with implications. I think that would be nice, Jackson finally said, looking to Vivian for confirmation. I'd like that very much, Vivian replied, her voice steadier now. As they made arrangements for dinner, none of them noticed Dr. Winters standing in the hallway outside the classroom door, which Madeline had left ajar. The principal's face was tight with concern as she pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Mrs. Bennett? Yes, I know you're in Europe, but there's something happening here that you should know about immediately. That evening, Vivian arrived at the Bennett estate with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The house was exactly what she'd expected, a sprawling mansion set back from the road, with manicured gardens and a circular driveway where a uniformed staff member greeted her car. Inside, Madeline gave her an enthusiastic tour, proudly showing off her bedroom with its canopy bed and wall of bookshelves. "Dad says I can redecorate if I want," she explained, leading Vivian down a hallway lined with expensive artwork. "Maybe you could help me? Since you're an art teacher?" "I'd love that," Vivian said, trying to take in the surreal reality of walking through her daughter's home, a home she could never have provided. Dinner was served in a formal dining room that could have seated 20, though only the three of them sat at one end of the long table. Despite the grandeur of the setting, the conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Madeline asked endless questions about Vivian's life, her family, her art. "Did you always want to be an artist?" Madeline asked between bites of perfectly cooked salmon. "Yes, but I studied business in college. That's how your father and I met, in an economics class." Jackson smiled at the memory. "Your mother was the only one who could explain supply and demand curves in a way that made sense to me. And your father was the only one who believed I could make a living as an artist someday." "You still could," Jackson said quietly. "Your work was always extraordinary." "You still paint?" Madeline asked eagerly. Vivian nodded. "When I can find the time, I have a small studio set up in my apartment." "Can I see it sometime?" "Of course you can." As the evening progressed, Vivian found herself relaxing, caught up in the simple joy of being with her daughter and the man she'd once loved. It almost felt like the family they might have been, in another life where things had gone differently. After dinner, while Madeline went upstairs to get a sketchbook she wanted to show Vivian, Jackson led her into his study, a wood-paneled room lined with books and dominated by a large desk. "I want to show you something," he said, unlocking a drawer and removing a small wooden box. From it, he took out a worn book, a collection of poetry they'd once read together in college. And tucked inside was exactly what Vivian had expected, the other half of her torn Polaroid, the half with her face. "You kept it," she whispered. "I couldn't let it go completely, even when I thought you'd chosen to leave." He hesitated, then added, "I looked for you, you know, after the adoption. I hired investigators, but they couldn't find any trace of Vivian Reyes. Now I understand why. I changed my name after I gave up Madeline. It was too painful to be myself anymore." Jackson moved closer, his voice low and intense. "We lost 15 years, Vivian. 15 years we could have been a family." "We can't get those years back," she said softly. "No, but we have now, and the future." Before Vivian could respond, they heard the front door open, followed by the sharp click of heels on marble. A moment later, a woman's voice called out, "Jackson? Where are you?" Jackson's face went pale. "Catherine. She's supposed to be in Europe until next week." The study door opened, and Catherine Bennett stood there, tall, blonde, and radiating cold fury. Her gaze swept over Vivian dismissively before fixing on Jackson. "So it's true," she said. "Dr. Winters called me. Said you were having some sort of reunion with Madeline's birth mother." She spat the last words like they tasted bitter. "Catherine, this isn't how I wanted you to find out." "Find out what exactly? That you've been lying to me for years? That you knew who Madeline's mother was all along?" "No, I didn't know. I just found out myself." Catherine's laugh was brittle. "Please, do you expect me to believe that?" The great Jackson Bennett, who investigates every business partner down to their shoe size, never bothered to look into his adopted daughter's background. "It wasn't like that," Jackson insisted. "The adoption was closed, anonymous. Except it wasn't, was it?" Catherine's gaze shifted to Vivian. "Who are you, really? Some gold digger who gave up her baby and now wants a piece of the Bennett fortune?" Vivian felt her face flush with anger. "I'm Madeline's mother, and I didn't come looking for anything. I didn't even know she was my daughter until a few days ago." "How convenient," Catherine turned back to Jackson. "And I suppose you're just going to welcome her into our lives, into our home, after everything my family has done for you?" "Your family," Jackson said, his voice hardening, "manipulated both of us. They separated us when Vivian was pregnant. They made sure I thought she'd left me, and she thought I'd abandoned her." Catherine's expression faltered slightly. "What are you talking about? Ask your brother. Ask him about the deal he made with Rachel 15 years ago." For a moment, Catherine looked genuinely confused. Then her face closed off again. "Whatever happened back then doesn't matter now. What matters is our family, our reputation, our company." What matters is Madeline, Jackson countered, and the fact that she deserves to know her real mother. I am her real mother. Catherine's voice rose sharply. I'm the one who raised her. I'm the one who's been here. When exactly were you here, Catherine? Jackson asked quietly. Between your charity galas and your shopping trips and your months in Europe. The barb hit its mark. Catherine flinched, then drew herself up taller. I won't be spoken to this way in my own home. And I won't allow this woman to disrupt our lives. Mom? Madeline's small voice came from the doorway. She stood there clutching her sketchbook, her eyes wide as she looked between the three adults. Catherine's demeanor changed instantly, softening as she turned to Madeline. Darling, I came home early to surprise you. Isn't that lovely? Madeline didn't move. Why are you yelling at Dad? And at Miss Torres? We're just having a grown-up discussion, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. It's about me, isn't it? About Miss Torres being my real mom. Catherine's smile froze. Who told you that? I heard them talking at school. And then Dad explained it to me. Madeline took a step into the room, her chin lifting slightly. I have two moms now, isn't that cool? The simplicity of the child's perspective left Catherine momentarily speechless. She looked at Jackson, who met her gaze steadily. We need to talk about this as adults, he said quietly. All of us, for Madeline's sake. Catherine's shoulders sagged slightly, the fight going out of her. Fine, but not tonight. I'm jet-lagged and I need time to process this. She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Vivian with less hostility but no less determination. This isn't over, not by a long shot. After Catherine left, an uncomfortable silence filled the study. Madeline looked between her father and Vivian, her young face troubled. Is Mom mad because you're here? She asked Vivian. It's complicated, sweetheart, Jackson answered before Vivian could. Your mom is surprised, that's all. She needs time to get used to the idea. Madeline nodded thoughtfully. Like when I got Pepper and Mittens didn't like her at first, but now they sleep together. Despite everything, Vivian couldn't help but smile at the child's comparison. Something like that, yes. I should probably go, Vivian said to Jackson. This has been a lot for everyone. Jackson nodded reluctantly. I'll walk you out. At the front door, away from Madeline's ears, Jackson spoke in a low, urgent voice. Don't disappear again, please. Whatever happens with Catherine, whatever complications come up, Madeline needs you in her life now, and so do I. The intensity in his eyes took Vivian back 15 years, to the last time she'd seen that look, the day before he vanished from her life, before everything fell apart. I'm not going anywhere, she promised. Not this time. The next few weeks unfolded in a delicate dance of new relationships and old wounds. Catherine remained in the house, but kept her distance, retreating to her wing of the mansion and emerging only for carefully orchestrated family appearances. Jackson arranged for Vivian to spend time with Madeline on weekends and some afternoons after school, neutral territory, away from the tension of the Bennett estate. One Saturday, Vivian took Madeline to her small apartment for the first time. She'd spent days cleaning and preparing, suddenly self-conscious about the modest space she'd called home for years. It's cozy, Madeline said diplomatically as she looked around the living room with its second-hand furniture and walls covered in artwork. It's small, Vivian acknowledged with a smile. But it's home. Did you paint all of these? Madeline asked, moving from one framed piece to another with genuine interest. Most of them. Some are from friends or students who've given me their work over the years. Madeline stopped in front of a small watercolor of a lake at sunset. This looks like the lake in Dad's picture. The torn one. Vivian nodded. It's the same place, Lake Willow. Your father and I used to go there when we were younger. Can we go there sometime, all three of us? The innocent question carried weight Madeline couldn't possibly understand. Maybe someday, Vivian said carefully. Would you like to see my studio now? The studio was really just a converted closet in the bedroom, but Vivian had maximized the space with clever storage and good lighting. Madeline's eyes widened when she saw the canvases stacked against the walls and the works in progress on the small easel. These are amazing, she breathed, gently touching the edge of a canvas showing a woman with her face turned away, looking out over a city skyline. Is this you? In a way, Vivian admitted. Art is always partly self-portrait, even when it doesn't look like you. They spent the afternoon painting together, Vivian showing Madeline techniques she didn't teach in her elementary school classes. The girl had natural talent, an eye for composition and color that reminded Vivian painfully of her own childhood dreams. "Did you always want to be an artist?" Madeline asked as they cleaned brushes side by side at the kitchen sink. "Always, but life doesn't always go the way we plan." "Because of me." The question was direct, without self-pity, but full of a child's perception. Vivian turned off the water and knelt to look Madeline in the eyes. "No, never because of you. Life took turns I didn't expect, but you were the best thing that ever happened to me, even when I couldn't be with you." Madeline considered this, then nodded. "Dad says the same thing, that I'm the best thing in his life. On that, your father and I completely agree." When Jackson came to pick Madeline up, he lingered in the doorway, his eyes taking in Vivian's apartment with undisguised curiosity. "Would you like to come in?" Vivian offered. "Madeline can show you what she painted today." Jackson stepped inside, seeming too large for the small space. "Nice place," he said, and Vivian could tell he meant it despite the obvious contrast to his own home. "Dad, look!" Madeline held up her painting. A surprisingly sophisticated landscape of Lake Willow, though she'd never seen it in person. She'd created it from Vivian's painting and her own imagination. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Jackson said, genuine pride in his voice. "You've got your mother's talent." The words hung in the air, simple but profound in their acknowledgement of the connection between Vivian and Madeline. "Can I go show Miss Vivian my room sometime?" Madeline asked as they were leaving. "At our house." Jackson and Vivian exchanged glances. "We'll have to see," Jackson said carefully. "Let's give it a little more time." But time wasn't on their side. 3 days later, Vivian was called into Dr. Winter's office at school. "Ms. Torres," the principal said without preamble, "I've received a formal complaint about your relationship with Madeline Bennett." Vivian felt her stomach drop. "From Catherine Bennett, I assume." "The source of the complaint is confidential, but the concern is that your personal connection to the child creates a conflict of interest in the classroom." "I've maintained complete professionalism." Dr. Winters held up a hand. "Nevertheless, the board feels it would be best if Madeline were transferred to another art class for the remainder of the year." "You're removing her from my class?" "It's for the best, Miss Torres. Surely you can see that." Vivian wanted to argue, to fight, but she knew it would only make things worse. "Does Madeline know?" "Her parents will inform her." Parents, plural. As if Vivian didn't count that afternoon, Vivian waited anxiously for Madeline's class, but the girl didn't appear. In her place was a note from the office explaining that Madeline Bennett had been reassigned to Ms. Patel's art class, effective immediately. After school, Vivian tried calling Jackson, but the call went straight to voicemail. She left a message, trying to keep the hurt and anger from her voice. Then she drove home, fighting tears the whole way. She was just unlocking her apartment door when her phone rang. Jackson's name flashed on the screen. "Did you know about this?" she demanded without greeting. "Not until it was done," Jackson replied, his voice tight. "Catherine went to the board without telling me. Can't you do something? You're Jackson Bennett. The school has your name on the gymnasium, for God's sake." "It's complicated, Vivian. Catherine's family has even more influence with the board than I do, and she's threatening to make this very public if I push back." "Make what public?" "That Madeline is my biological daughter. That's hardly a scandal." "No, but the way it happened could be. The Westbrook family manipulating both of us. The closed adoption, that wasn't really closed. Catherine's worried about how it would look for her family. So once again, I'm supposed to be erased because I don't fit into the perfect Bennett-Westbrook narrative." Jackson was silent for a moment. "I'm trying to find a solution that works for everyone, especially Madeline. She was upset about the class change." "Is she there? Can I talk to her?" "Catherine took her to her mother's for the night. Some grandmother-granddaughter tradition they have." Convenient timing, Vivian thought bitterly. "So what happens now? Catherine just keeps Madeline away from me." "No, our agreement about weekends stands. I made that very clear." "For how long, Jackson? Until Catherine finds a way to block that too?" "I won't let that happen." His voice hardened with determination. "Madeline needs you in her life. I need you in her life." The way he said it, I need you, sent an unwelcome flutter through Vivian's chest. This isn't about us, Jackson. It's about Madeline. I know, but the past few weeks, seeing you with her, it's made me realize how much was stolen from all of us. Vivian closed her eyes, fighting against the pull of old feelings. We can't go back. No, but we can go forward, together somehow. The hope in his voice was almost painful to hear. I have to go, she said abruptly. Call me when Madeline gets back. That night, Vivian couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, feeling the walls closing in. On impulse, she pulled out her paints and set up a canvas. She worked through the night, pouring her frustration and longing onto the canvas in bold strokes and colors. By morning, she had created something new. Not a landscape or a portrait, but an abstract explosion of emotion. At the center, barely discernible unless you knew to look for it, were three figures, connected by swirling lines of gold. Her phone rang as she was washing dried paint from her hands. It was Jackson again, but his voice was different, urgent, almost panicked. Vivian, have you seen Madeline? What? No. Isn't she with Catherine at her mother's? She was. But when Catherine went to wake her for breakfast, she was gone. Left a note saying she was going to find you? Fear gripped Vivian's heart. She doesn't know where I live. She has your address. She must have seen it on something at the house, a school directory or something. I'll look for her. She might be on her way here. I'm already in the car. Catherine's calling the police. The police? Vivian's fear spiked. Jackson, she's not missing. She's just looking for me. She's 8 years old and alone in the city, Vivian. Catherine's frantic. And probably blaming me, Vivian thought, but didn't say. I'll check around my neighborhood. Call me if you find her. Vivian grabbed her keys and ran downstairs, scanning the street in both directions. Her apartment was in a decent area. But still, the thought of Madeline wandering alone made her stomach clench with fear. She was about to get in her car when she spotted a small figure sitting on a bench at the bus stop across the street. Even from a distance, she recognized the purple backpack with butterfly patches. Madeline, she called, running across the street without checking for traffic. A car honked sharply, swerving to avoid her. The little girl looked up, her face brightening. Miss Vivian, I found you. Vivian reached the bench and pulled Madeline into a tight hug. What are you doing here? Your parents are worried sick. I left a note, Madeline said, as if that explained everything. Grandma Westbrook kept saying mean things about you. That you were trying to take me away. That you only wanted Dad's money. I knew it wasn't true. Vivian pulled out her phone. I need to call your father right now. While the phone rang, she looked Madeline over for any signs of harm. The girl seemed perfectly fine. If anything, she looked proud of her adventure. Vivian? Jackson's voice was tense. Any sign of her? She's with me. At the bus stop near my apartment, she's fine. She heard his sharp exhale of relief. Thank God. Put her on the phone. Vivian handed the phone to Madeline, who listened more than spoke as her father presumably delivered a mixture of relief and reprimand. When she handed the phone back, her lower lip was trembling slightly. Dad's really mad, she whispered. He was really scared, Vivian corrected gently. We both were. You can't just go off on your own like that, Madeline. It's not safe. But I had to see you, and Mom keeps trying to keep us apart. Vivian sighed, sitting down on the bench beside her daughter. Grown-up relationships are complicated. Your mom is adjusting to a big change. She doesn't want you to be my mom, too. No, probably not. But that doesn't change the fact that I am. Nothing can change that. Jackson's car pulled up to the curb a few minutes later. He jumped out and rushed to Madeline, kneeling to embrace her with a fierceness that spoke volumes about his fear. Don't ever do that again, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Do you understand me? Never. Madeline nodded against his shoulder. I'm sorry, Dad. Jackson looked up at Vivian over Madeline's head, his eyes conveying a mixture of relief and something deeper, more complicated. Thank you for finding her. She found me, Vivian corrected softly. As Jackson stood, still holding Madeline's hand tightly, his phone rang. He checked the screen and grimaced. It's Catherine. I need to let her know Madeline's safe. He stepped a few feet away to take the call, but his voice carried clearly in the morning air. Yes, she's fine. She's with me. And Vivian, no, Catherine, listen. That's not fair, and you know it. We'll discuss this when I get home." He hung up, his jaw tight with tension. "I need to get Madeline home." "Of course," Vivian said, though her heart ached at the thought of them leaving. "Vivian." Jackson hesitated. She's threatening to file for full custody if I don't agree to supervised visitation only." "She can't do that. I'm Madeline's biological mother." "Who gave her up for adoption?" Jackson said gently. "Legally, Catherine has been her mother for 8 years. The reality of her position hit Vivian like a physical blow. In the eyes of the law, she had no rights, no claim to the child she'd carried and given birth to, the child she'd given up. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackson looked down at Madeline, who was watching them both with worried eyes. "I don't know, but I'm not giving up on any of this." As they drove away, Madeline's small face pressed against the back window, Vivian felt something shift inside her. She'd spent 15 years accepting what she thought couldn't be changed, believing she had no choice but to let go of what mattered most. She wasn't going to make that mistake again. If you're feeling the tension building just like I am, hit that like button. The final confrontation that's coming will change these 3 lives forever. The next day, Vivian did something she'd never imagined doing. She called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but Elaine Morales, a former art student who had gone on to become one of the city's top family law attorneys. "I need to know my rights," Vivian explained after laying out the situation. "If any." Elaine's voice was kind but realistic. Biological parents who've terminated their rights through adoption generally have very limited legal standing. But there are exceptions, especially in cases where fraud or coercion might have been involved. "What do you mean?" "If you can prove that you were somehow coerced or deceived into giving up your child, or if the adoption itself involved fraudulent practices, you might have grounds to petition for visitation rights at minimum." Vivian thought about Rachel's lies, about the Westbrook family's manipulation, about the anonymous tip that had led Jackson to adopt Madeline. There might have been some irregularities. Then we might have something to work with. But Vivian, I have to warn you, these cases can get ugly, very ugly. And the people you're up against have virtually unlimited resources. "So do I," said a male voice from Vivian's doorway. She spun around to find Jackson standing there, the door she'd left unlocked pushed open. "I'll call you back," she said to Elaine, hanging up quickly. "You're going to fight for custody?" Jackson asked, stepping into the apartment. "How did you know I was home? And why are you here?" "I called the school. They said you'd called in sick. And I'm here because we need to talk, really talk, about what happens next." Vivian crossed her arms defensively. "I wasn't going to fight for custody, just visitation rights, some legal protection so Catherine can't cut me out of Madeline's life completely." Jackson nodded slowly. "That's fair. More than fair, actually. You're not angry. Why would I be angry? You're her mother, Vivian. You deserve to be in her life." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Vivian's heart ache. But there might be a simpler solution than a legal battle. "What kind of solution?" "Catherine and I talked last night, for hours, about everything. Our marriage, Madeline, you, the past 15 years. He took a deep breath. "She's agreed to a divorce." Vivian blinked in surprise. "Just like that?" "Not exactly. There are conditions. The main one being that we keep the circumstances of Madeline's adoption private, no public accusations against the Westbrook family." "She's still protecting her family's reputation." "Yes, but she's also acknowledging that our marriage has been over for years. We've been going through the motions for Madeline's sake and for the business. But after yesterday, she realized how much Madeline wants you in her life, needs you in her life. And she's okay with that?" Jackson's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "I wouldn't go that far, but she's accepting it. On the condition that we maintain a united front for Madeline's sake, no custody battles, no ugly court fights." "What about visitation?" "We'll work out a formal arrangement, shared time, holidays, all of it." He paused, then added quietly, "If that's what you want." Vivian studied his face, trying to read what wasn't being said. "What do you want, Jackson?" Jackson took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "What I want, what I've wanted since the moment I recognized you in that classroom, is a second chance. For all of us." The raw honesty in his voice made Vivian's breath catch. "A second chance at what exactly?" "At being a family. The family we should have been 15 years ago, if people hadn't interfered." He gestured around her small apartment. "You deserve more than this, Vivian. More than struggling to make ends meet. More than having to fight to see your own daughter." "I don't need your money, Jackson." "I know that. This isn't about money. It's about time, all the time that was stolen from us." He reached for her hand hesitantly, giving her every chance to pull away. "I never stopped loving you, Vivian. Even when I thought you'd left me. Even when I married Catherine. There was always this empty space that nothing else could fill." Vivian felt tears welling in her eyes. "It's been 15 years. We're different people now." "Are we? Or are we just older versions of who we always were?" His fingers tightened around hers. "The way you look at Madeline, that's the same way you used to look at your paintings. Like you're seeing something precious that no one else can see." "And you still run your hand through your hair when you're nervous," Vivian said softly. "Some things don't change." "No, they don't." Jackson took another step closer. "I'm not asking for everything all at once, just a chance. To see if what we had is still there. To build something new for Madeline. For us." Vivian wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that after everything, the separation, the lies, the years apart, they could somehow find their way back to each other. But doubt crept in, cold and insistent. "What about Catherine? The divorce? Your company? It's all tied to the Westbrooks." "I've spent 15 years building that company into something that can stand on its own. The initial merger was with Westbrooks, yes, but we've expanded far beyond that now. Catherine knows that a messy public battle would hurt her family as much as it would hurt me." "And Madeline, how does she fit into all this?" Jackson's face softened. "She's the heart of it. Yesterday, when she ran away to find you, it made me realize how much she needs both of us. Not just visits or shared custody arrangements. She needs her family whole." "It's not that simple, Jackson. We can't just erase 15 years and pretend nothing happened. I'm not asking to erase anything. I'm asking if we can build something new from here. Something honest." The hope in his voice was almost painful to hear. Vivian pulled her hand away gently, needing space to think clearly. "I need time," she said. "This is a lot to process." Jackson nodded, respecting her boundary. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere this time." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Madeline asked if you could come to her art show at school next week. She's displaying that painting she did of Lake Willow. Of course I'll be there. Catherine will be there too," he warned. "It might be awkward." Vivian managed a small smile. "I think I can handle awkward for Madeline's sake." After Jackson left, Vivian sat alone in her apartment, her mind spinning with possibilities she'd never allowed herself to consider. A future with Madeline in her daily life. A second chance with Jackson. A family, the family that had been taken from her. It seemed too good to be true. And in Vivian's experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. The night of Madeline's art show arrived with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Vivian dressed carefully in her best outfit, a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. As she fastened her mother's old silver necklace, she caught her reflection in the mirror and barely recognized herself. There was a light in her eyes that had been missing for years. The school gymnasium had been transformed into a makeshift gallery, with student artwork displayed on portable walls. Parents and teachers mingled, admiring the children's creations with the obligatory oohs and ahs of adults determined to be encouraging. Vivian spotted Madeline immediately, not because of her height or appearance, but because something in her heart simply recognized her daughter in any crowd. The girl was standing proudly beside her painting, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Vivian's monthly rent, her hair pulled back in a neat braid, and flanking her on either side were Jackson and Catherine, the picture of proud parents, though Vivian could see the tension in their postures, the careful distance they maintained from each other. Madeline saw her first, her face lighting up. "Miss Vivian, you came!" She rushed over, throwing her arms around Vivian's waist in an enthusiastic hug that drew curious glances from nearby parents. "Of course I came," Vivian said, returning the hug. I wouldn't miss your first art show for anything. Jackson approached with a warm smile, while Catherine hung back, her expression carefully neutral. Vivian, glad you could make it. Your painting is beautiful, Vivian told Madeline, allowing the girl to drag her toward the display. You captured the light on the water perfectly. I used the techniques you showed me, Madeline said proudly. Dad says maybe we can go to the real lake someday. All of us. The all of us hung in the air, its meaning clear. Vivian glanced at Catherine, who had finally joined them, her smile tight but present. It's a lovely painting, Madeline, Catherine said, pointedly ignoring Vivian. You've clearly inherited your father's eye for detail. The deliberate exclusion of Vivian from the compliment wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Madeline, who frowned slightly. Actually, Mom, Ms. Vivian is the artist. Dad can't even draw stick figures right. Jackson coughed to hide a laugh, while Catherine's smile grew even tighter. Of course, darling. I just meant you have your father's perfectionism. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group, broken only when Dr. Winters approached, her eyebrows rising slightly at the sight of the four of them together. Madeline, your painting has been selected for the district showcase next month, she announced. Congratulations. Really? Madeline bounced with excitement. Did you hear that? My painting's going to be in a real show. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Jackson said, genuine pride in his voice. Indeed, Dr. Winters agreed. We'll need a parent to sign the permission form. She held out a clipboard, looking uncertainly between Jackson and Catherine. I'll sign it, Catherine said quickly, taking the clipboard. Actually, Jackson interjected, I think both Madeline's mothers should sign. The gymnasium seemed to go silent, though in reality only those closest to them had heard. Dr. Winters looked startled, while Catherine froze with the pen halfway to the paper. Both mothers? Dr. Winters repeated, her gaze shifting to Vivian with sudden understanding. Yes, Jackson said firmly. Catherine and Vivian, Madeline's adoptive mother and her biological mother. Catherine's face flushed with anger or embarrassment. Perhaps both. Jackson, this is hardly the time or place. It's exactly the time and place, he interrupted gently. Madeline's achievement should be recognized by her whole family, and that includes Vivian. Dr. Winters, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding before her, held out the clipboard uncertainly. Perhaps you could all discuss this privately and return the form tomorrow. There's nothing to discuss, Catherine said, her voice tight. I am Madeline's legal mother. I'll sign the form. She scrawled her signature quickly and handed the clipboard back to Dr. Winters, who retreated with a murmured congratulations to Madeline. Mom, why can't Miss Vivian sign too? Madeline asked, her young face troubled by the tension she could feel but not fully understand. Catherine knelt to Madeline's level, her voice softening. Because, darling, these forms are for legal parents, and while Miss Torres is special to you, I'm your mother in the eyes of the law. But she's my real mom, Madeline insisted. By blood. The bluntness of the child's statement hit Catherine visibly, making her flinch. For a moment, Vivian almost felt sorry for her. This woman who had raised Madeline for 8 years, only to have her position challenged by a biological connection she couldn't compete with. Catherine, Vivian said quietly, I'm not trying to take your place. I know you've been Madeline's mother her whole life. Do you? Catherine stood, her composure returning. Because it seems to me that you and Jackson have been making plans that very much involve taking my place. Jackson stepped forward. This isn't the place for this conversation. Madeline, why don't you show your grandparents your painting? I think I just saw them come in. Madeline looked reluctant to leave, sensing the adult drama unfolding, but she nodded and moved away toward an elderly couple who had just entered the gymnasium. Once she was out of earshot, Catherine turned to Jackson, her voice low but intense. You promised me we would handle this transition carefully, for Madeline's sake. And we will, Jackson assured her, but pretending Vivian isn't Madeline's mother isn't careful. It's cruel, to both of them. So what's your solution? We all play happy family, take turns tucking her in at night. If that's what's best for Madeline, yes, Jackson said firmly. Catherine laughed bitterly. And I suppose the next step is you and Vivian picking up where you left off 15 years ago. One big happy family. Vivian felt her face flush. That's not, isn't it? Catherine cut her off. I've seen the way he looks at you. The way he's always looked at that torn photograph he thinks I don't know about. Jackson's expression softened. Catherine, our marriage has been over in all but name for years. You know that as well as I do. Yes, but I didn't expect you to replace me quite so quickly. Or with someone from your past that my family specifically warned you against. No one is replacing anyone, Vivian interjected. Madeline has enough room in her heart for both of us. Catherine turned to her, really looking at her for the first time. You think this is just about Madeline? This is about 15 years of my life. 15 years I spent building a family and a position in society, only to have it all threatened because you happened to take a job at my daughter's school. I didn't know, Vivian said softly. I had no idea Madeline was my daughter when I took that job, or that Jackson was her father. And yet, here we are. Catherine's voice had lost its edge, replaced by a weariness that seemed to age her. The three of us, back where we started 15 years ago. Except now there's a child caught in the middle. Jackson reached for Catherine's hand, a gesture of unexpected kindness. No one wants to hurt you, Catherine, or Madeline. We just want to find a way forward that honors everyone's place in her life. Catherine looked down at his hand on hers, then back up at his face. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of their shared history, perhaps, or a final acceptance that it was truly over. I won't fight you on the divorce, she said quietly, or on Vivian's place in Madeline's life. But I have conditions. Name them, Jackson said. First, we tell no one about the circumstances of Madeline's adoption. Not the manipulation, not the lies. As far as the world is concerned, it was a standard closed adoption that happened to bring Vivian back into our lives by coincidence. Jackson nodded. Agreed. Second, we maintain a united front for Madeline. No matter what happens between the three of us, she never feels caught in the middle or forced to choose. Of course, Vivian said. That's what I want too. And third, Catherine continued, looking directly at Vivian now. You give me time. Time to adjust to sharing my daughter. Time to find my own place in this new arrangement. The request was surprisingly vulnerable, coming from a woman who had seemed so coldly determined to push Vivian out of Madeline's life. It revealed something Vivian hadn't fully considered, that Catherine, for all her wealth and social position, was afraid of losing the one thing that truly mattered to her, her daughter's love. I can do that, Vivian said softly. We have the rest of our lives to figure this out. There's no rush. Catherine nodded, a silent agreement passing between the two women who, under different circumstances, might never have had anything in common, but who now shared the most important connection of all, love for the same child. Across the room, Madeline was returning with her grandparents, her face alight with excitement and pride. Seeing the three adults standing together, no longer radiating tension, she broke into a wide smile. Grandma and Grandpa want to meet Miss Vivian, she announced, pulling the elderly couple forward. Catherine's parents, the very people who had orchestrated the separation of Vivian and Jackson 15 years ago, now stood face to face with the woman they had erased from their son-in-law's life. The moment stretched, taut with unspoken history. Then Catherine's father, his face lined with age but his eyes still sharp, extended his hand to Vivian. Miss Torres, we've heard a great deal about you from our granddaughter. The simple gesture, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement, broke the tension. Vivian accepted his hand, choosing to focus on the present rather than the past. Your granddaughter is an extraordinary girl, she said. You must be very proud. We are, Catherine's mother agreed, her gaze moving between Vivian and Madeline, noting the similarities that were obvious now that one knew to look for them. Of many things. As the conversation continued, superficial but civil, Vivian felt Jackson's hand brush against hers, a small, private gesture of support and something more, a promise, perhaps, of the second chance they'd both been given. Later that evening, as the art show wound down, Madeline gathered her three parents together for a photo in front of her painting, insisting that a passing teacher capture the moment. My whole family, she declared proudly, standing in the center with Jackson and Catherine on one side, Vivian on the other. The flash went off, preserving the image of 4 people at the beginning of a journey none of them had expected. A journey toward a new definition of family, built not on convention or expectation, but on love and truth and second chances. As they left the school, Madeline walking between Jackson and Catherine, while Vivian followed a few steps behind. Jackson glanced back, his eyes meeting Vivian's with a look that bridged 15 years of separation in an instant. "Lake Willow," he mouthed silently. "Soon." Vivian nodded, a smile spreading across her face. They had lost 15 years, yes, but they had found each other again, and this time nothing and no one would come between them and the family they were meant to be. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family, second chances, and the power of truth to heal even the deepest wounds. And let me know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Vivian's shoes? Would you have fought for your place in your child's life, no matter the cost? Or would you have walked away to spare everyone the pain of disruption? Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead us exactly where we're meant to be. I will see you on the next one.